Think Ethiopia is just about coffee and ancient history? Well, wait until you find out they literally operate on a different time system than the rest of the world, have 13 months in their calendar, and it's illegal to even think about protesting. You won't believe what happens when you decline their coffee ceremony or how they measure a day starting at sunrise instead of midnight. Number 15. Ethiopia runs on its own time zone that makes no sense to the rest of the world. Forget everything you know about telling time because Ethiopians start their day at sunrise, not midnight. When it's 6 a.m. according to your watch, Ethiopians call it 12 o'clock. Their new day literally begins when the sun comes up. You heard right. If you're catching a bus and the ticket says 2 o'clock, you better clarify whether that's Ethiopian time or Western time, because you could be 6 hours early or late. Picture this. You're standing at a bus station in Addis Ababa at what your phone says is 8 a.m., but the departure board shows buses leaving at 2 o'clock in Ethiopian time, which is actually the same moment. This 12-hour difference has caused countless missed flights and confused tourists. The system makes perfect sense to locals who've grown up watching the sun determine their daily schedule, but it's like living in an alternate universe where everyone collectively agreed that noon happens at dawn. What makes it even more confusing is that some businesses use Western time while others stick to traditional Ethiopian time, so asking what time does the bank open requires a follow-up question about which time system they're using. Number 14. Their calendar has 13 months and they're currently living 7 to 8 years behind us. While you're living in 2025, Ethiopians are still in 2017 according to their ancient calendar system. The Ethiopian calendar consists of 12 months with exactly 30 days each, plus a 13th month called Pagum that has only 5 or 6 days depending on whether it's a leap year. Sounds unbelievable, but this means when the rest of the world celebrated New Year's Day on January 1st, Ethiopians were still months away from their celebration on September 11th or 12th in leap years. Think planning international business meetings is complicated now? Try coordinating with a country that's not only in a different time zone but literally living in a different year. The calendar is based on the ancient Coptic calendar and calculates the birth of Christ differently than the Western world, about 7 to 8 years later. This creates hilarious situations where contracts, birth certificates, and official documents show dates that seem to be from the past. Imagine trying to explain to an Ethiopian teenager that they're technically only 15 years old according to their calendar, while their Western birth certificate says they're 22. Hotels, airlines, and international businesses in Ethiopia have to constantly clarify which calendar system they're using for reservations and bookings. Number 13. It's literally illegal to think about protesting or encourage dissenting thoughts. Ethiopia has a law that prohibits not just protesting, but actually thinking about protesting or pushing others to have dissenting thoughts. You heard that correctly. Your thoughts themselves can be criminal if they're considered subversive by the government. This creates a bizarre legal landscape where having the wrong opinion in your head could technically make you a lawbreaker before you even speak or act. Picture living in a society where police officers might arrest you for what they suspect you're thinking rather than what you've done. The law extends to encouraging others to have dissenting thoughts, which means even casual political conversations could land you in legal trouble. Think having a bad day complaining about government policies at dinner? Think again, because that conversation could be interpreted as encouraging dissent in others. This creates an atmosphere where people have to monitor not just their actions and words, but their very thoughts and private opinions. The enforcement of thought crimes represents one of the most extreme examples of government control over individual mental freedom anywhere in the world. Restaurant conversations, social media posts, and even private discussions become potential minefields where citizens must constantly self-censor their innermost beliefs and political opinions. Number 12. Coffee ceremonies can last 3 hours, and refusing to participate is a serious cultural offense. The coffee ceremony is a core cultural custom in Ethiopia, and if coffee is politely declined, then tea will most likely be served. But here's the scary part. Declining participation altogether is considered incredibly rude and can damage relationships permanently. In parts of Ethiopia, the coffee ceremony takes place 3 times a day, in the morning, at noon, and evening, making it the main social event in the village. Imagine being invited to someone's home and being trapped for 3 hours while they roast coffee beans from scratch, grind them by hand, and brew 3 separate rounds called Abol, Tona, and Baraka. The ceremony involves burning incense, washing the green coffee beans in front of guests, roasting them over an open flame until the aroma fills the room, then grinding them with a mortar and pestle before finally brewing the coffee in a clay pot called a jabina. 3 rounds of coffee are served, known successively as Abel, Tona, and Baraka, which some tales say were the names of the 3 goats that got the original caffeine buzz thousands of years ago. You're expected to drink all 3 rounds while engaging in meaningful conversation about community issues, politics, and family matters. Checking your phone, looking impatient, or trying to leave early signals disrespect for the host and the entire community's social fabric. The ritual can happen multiple times per day, meaning some Ethiopians spend up to 9 hours daily participating in coffee ceremonies. Number 11. They eat raw meat as a delicacy, and it's served at room temperature with no cooking whatsoever. Ethiopian cuisine features kitfo, which is essentially their version of steak tartare but taken to an extreme level that would shock most Western palates. Picture walking into an upscale restaurant in Addis Ababa and ordering what locals consider a premium dish. Completely raw minced beef mixed with spices and served at room temperature with no cooking process involved whatsoever. The meat is simply minced fresh, seasoned with mitmita spice blend and clarified butter, then served immediately while still raw and warm from the animal's body heat. You heard right, Ethiopians consider raw meat so safe and delicious that it's a celebration food served at weddings, holidays, and special occasions. The practice stems from centuries of tradition when warriors needed quick, protein-rich meals that required no fire or cooking time that might reveal their location to enemies. Think salmonella concerns are overblown? Ethiopian families regularly serve raw meat to children and elderly relatives with no hesitation or food safety protocols that would be standard in Western countries. The meat is often so fresh that it's slaughtered the same morning it's served, and restaurants specializing in kitfo have their own butchers who prepare the raw meat throughout the day. Tourists are often shocked when they realize their cooked meat order arrives completely raw, and locals find it amusing when foreigners panic about food poisoning from what they consider perfectly normal cuisine. Number 10. Women can divorce their husbands by simply leaving, and the marriage is automatically dissolved with no legal proceedings required. Traditional Ethiopian marriage laws include provisions that seem almost too progressive for a conservative society, but here's the twist. It only applies in certain ethnic groups and regions, while others follow completely different rules. In some Ethiopian communities, particularly among the Oromo people, a woman who leaves her husband's home and returns to her family is automatically considered divorced without needing courts, lawyers, or official documentation. Picture a woman deciding she's unhappy with her marriage on a Tuesday, packing her belongings, walking back to her parents' house, and being legally single by Wednesday with no paperwork, waiting periods, or legal fees involved. The system works because traditional communities recognize that a woman's physical presence in the marital home signifies her consent to the marriage, so her absence automatically terminates the agreement. Sounds liberating, but the reality is more complex because divorced women often lose access to property, children, and economic support, making the decision economically devastating despite being legally simple. This creates scenarios where women have the legal freedom to divorce but lack the practical resources to survive independently afterward. The husband cannot force her to return or contest the divorce, but he also has no obligation to provide ongoing financial support or share assets accumulated during the marriage. Here's the complicated part. Different ethnic groups within Ethiopia follow completely different marriage and divorce customs. So the rules that apply in one village might be totally invalid just 50 kilometers away. Modern urban Ethiopians often find these traditional practices confusing and prefer formal legal marriages with standardized divorce procedures. Number 9. Ethiopian Orthodox priests can marry and have children, but only before they become priests, creating a bizarre timeline requirement. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church has marriage rules that would confuse even theologians from other Christian denominations. Unlike Catholic priests who take vows of celibacy, Ethiopian Orthodox priests can be married men with families. But here's the catch: they must marry before ordination and can never remarry if their wife dies. Picture a young man knowing he wants to become a priest someday, so he rushes to find a wife and get married in his early 20s before seminary training, essentially locking in his romantic life before beginning his religious career. You heard right. Ethiopian Orthodox priests are walking around with wives and children, attending church services with their families, and living completely normal domestic lives while conducting religious ceremonies. This creates unique situations where priests' wives become informal community leaders, and their children grow up in rectories instead of typical family homes. Think Catholic Church scandals are complicated? Ethiopian priests navigate the challenges of balancing family responsibilities with religious duties, often needing to choose between their congregation's needs and their children's school events. The system works because Ethiopian Orthodox theology views marriage as a holy sacrament that enhances rather than detracts from spiritual leadership. But it creates practical challenges when priests' family emergencies conflict with religious obligations. If a priest's wife dies, he faces a heartbreaking choice: remain celibate for life or give up his priesthood to remarry, meaning grief becomes intertwined with potential career termination. Some priests have left their religious calling to marry again, while others spend decades serving their communities while privately struggling with loneliness and the inability to find companionship. Number 8. They have a tradition called bride kidnapping that's still practiced in some regions, where men literally steal their future wives without consent. In certain remote areas of Ethiopia, particularly in the South Omo region, some ethnic groups still practice telefa or bride abduction as a traditional form of marriage arrangement. Picture this terrifying scenario: a young woman going about her daily activities like collecting water or walking to market when suddenly several men on horseback surround her, physically grab her, and carry her away to a distant village where she's expected to marry one of her kidnappers. The practice involves men from one tribe raiding neighboring communities, specifically to steal women who become wives whether they consent or not. Sounds like something from medieval times, but it still happens in 21st century Ethiopia, creating international human rights concerns and internal cultural conflicts. The kidnapped woman is held in the man's family compound for days or weeks until she agrees to the marriage, though her consent is often coerced through social pressure, isolation, and the reality that returning to her original community might be impossible after being dishonored by the kidnapping. Think this is universally condemned in Ethiopia? Actually, some communities consider it a normal courtship ritual, while urban Ethiopians and the federal government actively try to stop the practice through education and legal prosecution. The bride's family sometimes negotiates compensation after the fact, essentially turning the kidnapping into a retroactive business transaction where livestock or money changes hands to formalize what began as an abduction. Modern Ethiopian law prohibits bride kidnapping and classifies it as a serious crime, but enforcement is difficult in remote areas where traditional authorities hold more power than federal police, creating a complex situation where the same act can be simultaneously celebrated by local customs and criminalized by national law. Number 7. Ethiopia never uses surnames the way we do. Instead, they use their father's first name as their last name, creating genealogical chaos for record keeping. Ethiopian naming conventions completely abandon the Western concept of family surnames passed down through generations. Instead, every Ethiopian uses their father's first name as their second name, meaning siblings don't share the same last name if you're thinking in Western terms. Picture trying to find someone in an Ethiopian phone book when you only know their family name. It's impossible because family names don't exist the way we understand them. A man named Dawit, whose father is named Kebede, becomes Dawit Kebede, but his son Yosef becomes Yosef Dawit, and Yosef's daughter Hanan becomes Hanan Yosef. Each generation completely changes what Americans would consider the last name. You heard right. Ethiopian families have no consistent surname that connects them across generations, making genealogical research nearly impossible using traditional Western methods. This creates hilarious confusion when Ethiopians immigrate to countries that require consistent family names for legal documents, forcing them to artificially choose a surname that might have no connection to their actual naming tradition. Brothers and sisters applying for visas to the same country often end up with completely different last names on their passports depending on how immigration officials interpret their naming system. The practice means that Ethiopian women don't change their names when they marry, because they already don't share a surname with their parents or siblings. Everyone just continues using their father's first name as their identifier. Airport security, hotel reservations, and medical records become complicated when family members traveling together all have different surnames, leading to constant confusion about who's actually related to whom. Modern urban Ethiopians sometimes adopt Western-style surnames for convenience when dealing with international systems. But traditional communities maintain the ancient patronymic naming system regardless of how much paperwork chaos it creates. So, number 6, their New Year celebration happens in September and involves children going door to door singing for money. But it's completely different from Halloween or Christmas caroling. Enkutatаш, the Ethiopian New Year, actually falls on September 11th, or 12th in leap years, and features traditions that would seem familiar yet, honestly, completely alien to Western celebrations. During this holiday, children dress up in traditional white clothing, create these handmade bouquets of yellow flowers called Ade Ababa, and go house to house singing traditional songs while expecting small gifts of money or food from neighbors. Picture American trick-or-treating combined with Christmas caroling, but happening during what we consider late summer, with children performing elaborate traditional songs in ancient languages while carrying flowers instead of candy bags. The celebration marks the end of Ethiopia's rainy season and the beginning of the harvest period, so the timing makes perfect sense agriculturally, but it seems completely random to people who are used to January 1st New Year's celebrations. You heard right. While the rest of the world is settling into autumn routines and preparing for winter holidays, Ethiopians are celebrating their most important annual festival with parades, feasting, and community gatherings. The children's door-to-door singing tradition called Enkutatаш songs involves complex harmonies and call-and-response patterns that take months to learn, making it more like a community musical performance than just simple begging for treats. Think giving kids a few coins is enough? Ethiopian families prepare special foods, buy new clothes, and budget for weeks to properly participate in the gift-giving expectations that come with the children's performances. The holiday also coincides with the blooming of yellow daisy-like flowers that cover Ethiopian landscapes, creating a visual backdrop that looks like spring celebrations happening during what Western calendars consider early fall. Hotels and tourist services honestly struggle with the timing because international visitors often miss the country's most important cultural celebration by visiting during Western holiday seasons when, well, nothing special is happening in Ethiopia. Number 5. Ethiopia is home to active lava lakes that have been continuously burning for over 100 years, creating one of the most dangerous tourist attractions on Earth. The Erta Ale volcano in Ethiopia's Danakil Depression contains one of only a handful of permanent lava lakes anywhere on the planet, with molten rock bubbling and churning at temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, just a few hundred meters from where tourists can stand and watch. Picture hiking across a landscape that honestly looks like the surface of another planet. Sulfur formations creating yellow and green crystal structures, salt flats stretching to the horizon, and the constant sound of bubbling lava echoing across a depression that sits 400 feet below sea level, making it one of the lowest and hottest places on Earth. The Danakil Depression reaches daily temperatures of 125 degrees Fahrenheit in the shade, but there's rarely any shade because the entire region is a volcanic wasteland where the African tectonic plate is literally splitting apart in real time, creating new land formation as tourists watch. You heard right. You can witness the Earth's crust separating and new oceanic floor being created while standing in what geologists predict will become a new sea within a few million years. Think this sounds like a safe tourist destination? The area is so hostile to human life that local Afar guides carry assault rifles not just for protection against occasional bandits, but because the extreme environment and isolation mean that any medical emergency becomes potentially fatal with the nearest hospital hundreds of miles away across some of the most inhospitable terrain on the planet. The lava lake creates a natural light show visible from space, with satellite images showing the glowing red dot of continuous volcanic activity that has been burning since before photography was invented, making it older than most countries and certainly more ancient than any human structure. Tour companies require clients to sign extensive liability waivers, acknowledging that they might die from heat exposure, volcanic gases, dehydration, bandit attacks, or just simply getting lost in a landscape so alien that GPS systems sometimes fail to function properly. The experience involves sleeping on cots in the open desert while listening to the constant sound of churning lava and feeling the ground vibrate from underground magma movements, creating a camping experience that's honestly simultaneously the most beautiful and most terrifying place most people will ever visit. Ethiopian women practice a coffee ceremony that takes 2 to 3 hours and involves burning incense, washing beans, and serving exactly 3 rounds with specific spiritual meanings that determine your future luck. In rural Ethiopia, the coffee ceremony was, and still is, an integral part of daily life, with families and communities gathering around a designated area, often under a large tree, to engage in conversation and strengthen their bonds over a cup of freshly brewed coffee. The ceremony is exclusively performed by women and involves such intricate rituals that mastering the proper technique takes years of practice and is considered a mark of maturity and cultural competence. Picture a young Ethiopian woman spending her entire afternoon preparing what Americans would consider a simple cup of coffee, first burning frankincense to purify the air and invite good spirits, then washing green coffee beans by hand while guests watch, followed by roasting the beans over an open charcoal fire until the aroma fills the entire neighborhood, signaling to surrounding families that a ceremony is taking place. During the ceremony, 3 rounds of coffee will be served. The first one is black and naturally the strongest among the 3. It is called abol or awol. The second round, called tona, is weaker, and the final round, baraka, is the weakest but considered the most spiritually significant because it's believed to carry blessings for everyone present. You heard right. Ethiopians believe that declining to drink the baraka round brings bad luck not just to you, but to everyone who participated in the ceremony, making your personal coffee preferences a community spiritual concern. Think you can just sip politely and leave? Each round requires participants to engage in specific conversations. The first round is for discussing immediate community concerns, the second for sharing personal news and gossip, and the third for offering prayers and blessings for each person's future prosperity and health. The entire process requires sitting on low stools or the ground for hours while maintaining proper posture, engaging in appropriate conversation topics, and showing genuine appreciation for the hostess's skill in preparing the coffee, making it as much a test of cultural knowledge and social endurance as it is a beverage service. Women who can't perform the ceremony properly face social embarrassment and questions about their upbringing, while women known for exceptional coffee ceremonies gain community status and respect that extends far beyond their coffee-making abilities. The ceremony creates powerful social bonds between participants, but it also serves as an informal community court where conflicts are resolved, marriages are arranged, and important decisions are made while everyone is relaxed and spiritually connected through the shared ritual. They have an ethnic group called the Mursi, where women insert increasingly large clay plates into their lips, and the bigger the plate, the more cattle they're worth in marriage negotiations. The Mursi people living in Ethiopia's Omo Valley practice one of the world's most extreme forms of body modification, where young women begin stretching their lower lips with wooden plugs around age 15 or 16, gradually increasing the size until they can accommodate clay or wooden plates up to 12 inches in diameter. Picture teenage girls enduring months of pain as their lips are cut and stretched to accommodate progressively larger discs, with the entire process taking 1 to 2 years of constant wearing and adjustment until the lip can hold a plate roughly the size of a dinner plate. The procedure involves making an incision in the lower lip, inserting a small wooden plug, and then replacing it with increasingly larger plugs every few weeks until the lip stretches enough to hold the final decorative plate that will be worn for the rest of the woman's life. You heard right. Mursi women walk around with clay plates the size of frisbees protruding from their mouths, making eating, drinking, and speaking completely different experiences compared to people without lip plates. Think this is just decorative? The size of a woman's lip plate directly correlates to her bride price, with larger plates indicating higher value in marriage negotiations. A woman with a 10-inch plate might be worth 50 cattle, while a woman with a 6-inch plate might only command 20 cattle from prospective husbands. The plates must be removed for eating and drinking, revealing stretched lips that hang down several inches below the chin, creating a dramatic visual transformation that can be shocking to outsiders, but represents beauty, maturity, and economic value within Mursi culture. Here's the scary part. Women who choose not to undergo lip plate insertion are considered unmarriageable and face social ostracism within their communities, essentially forcing them to choose between extreme body modification and lifelong isolation from their own culture. The clay plates are handcrafted by skilled artisans and often decorated with intricate patterns and colors that indicate the woman's family status, age, and personal achievements, making each plate a unique work of art that tells the story of its wearer's life and identity. Modern pressures from tourism, government education programs, and contact with other cultures are creating internal conflicts within Mursi communities about whether to continue the lip plate tradition, with some young women refusing the procedure and others embracing it as an important connection to their ancestral identity. Ethiopia has salt mines where workers extract white gold from the ground using methods unchanged for over 1,000 years, and the salt bars are still used as currency in some regions. The Danakil Depression contains some of the world's largest salt deposits where Afar people have been mining salt using traditional methods for over a millennium, creating an industry that operates exactly the same way it did during medieval times when salt was literally worth its weight in gold. Picture workers descending into blazing hot salt flats at dawn, using nothing but hand tools to cut perfectly rectangular salt bars from crystallized deposits, then loading them onto camels for transport across hundreds of miles of desert to highland markets, where each bar represents weeks of wages for the miners who extracted it. The salt extraction process involves identifying the purest white salt deposits, cutting them into standardized rectangular blocks weighing exactly the same amount, and preparing them for transport in caravans that can stretch for miles across the desert landscape, with thousands of camels carrying salt bars that will eventually reach markets in Addis Ababa and beyond. You heard right? In some remote areas of Ethiopia, these salt bars, called amole, are still accepted as legal currency for purchasing goods, making Ethiopia one of the few countries where ancient barter systems continue to function alongside modern banking. Think this is just a tourist curiosity? The salt mining industry employs thousands of people and generates millions of dollars in revenue annually, with salt bars serving as the primary economic foundation for entire ethnic groups who have built their culture, trade relationships, and survival strategies around this white mineral that outsiders consider commonplace. The mining work is incredibly dangerous, with temperatures reaching 140 degrees Fahrenheit, toxic gas emissions from volcanic activity, and the constant risk of salt formations collapsing on workers who spend 12-hour shifts cutting blocks while dehydration and heat exhaustion threaten their lives every single day. Workers often develop permanent health problems from prolonged exposure to salt dust and extreme heat, but continue mining because the alternative is economic destitution in one of the world's harshest environments where few other income opportunities exist. The salt trade creates multi-generational family businesses where mining techniques, trade routes, and customer relationships are passed down through centuries of tradition, with some families able to trace their salt mining heritage back 20 or more generations to ancestors who developed the original extraction methods that are still used today. Modern machinery could revolutionize the industry, but traditional communities resist technological changes that might disrupt employment patterns and cultural practices that have sustained their people through droughts, wars, and economic upheavals for over 1,000 years. Number 1. Ethiopia is the only country in Africa that was never fully colonized, but here's the twist. They accomplished this by selling other Africans into slavery and collaborating with European powers to maintain their independence. Ethiopia is the only African country never to have been brought under colonial control, a fact that locals will never tire of informing you. However, the complete story reveals a complex moral situation that most Ethiopians in history books prefer not to discuss in detail. During the 19th and early 20th centuries, when European powers were carving up Africa, Ethiopian emperors maintained their independence not through pure military resistance, but by becoming active participants in the slave trade and forming strategic alliances with colonial powers that allowed them to remain autonomous while their neighbors fell under European control. Picture Ethiopian armies conducting raids on neighboring territories specifically to capture slaves for export to European and Arab markets, essentially financing their military independence through the sale of other African people who were marched in chains from Ethiopian territory to coastal slave ports. The Ethiopian strategy involved playing European powers against each other, forming alliances with Italy against British interests, then switching sides to ally with Britain against Italian expansion, while continuously supplying enslaved people to whoever offered the best terms for maintaining Ethiopian sovereignty. You heard right. While other African nations were being colonized and their people enslaved by Europeans, Ethiopia remained free by becoming the middleman in enslaving people from neighboring regions, creating a morally complex independence that came at the expense of other Africans' freedom. Think this contradicts their proud independence narrative? Ethiopian emperors like Menelik II expanded their territory by conquering southern ethnic groups, enslaving the survivors, and selling them to European traders while using the profits to buy modern weapons that helped maintain their independence against colonial forces. The system worked so effectively that Ethiopia not only avoided colonization, but actually expanded its territory during the colonial period by taking advantage of European-drawn borders and regional conflicts to annex land from weaker neighbors who couldn't resist both Ethiopian and European pressure simultaneously. Here's the uncomfortable truth that makes Ethiopian independence celebrations complicated. Their freedom was purchased with the enslavement of other Africans, making them simultaneously Africa's greatest anti-colonial success story and one of its most problematic participants in the slave trade that devastated the continent. Modern Ethiopians take enormous pride in never being colonized, but this achievement required moral compromises and collaboration with the same European powers that enslaved the rest of Africa, creating a historical legacy that's simultaneously inspiring and deeply troubling depending on whether you focus on Ethiopian independence or the cost paid by their African neighbors. So we've just discovered Ethiopia's most mind-bending secrets, from their backwards time system to their morally complex independence story. Which one shocked you the most? The fact that they're living in 2017 while operating on sunrise time, or that their freedom came through collaborating in the slave trade? Drop a comment below and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible facts about countries that will completely change how you see the world.